Melvina, I want to bring you in last but not least and get your perspective on enforcement. You've heard folks talk a little bit about here's what the agencies do, here's the role that they play, and we've talked a little bit about the structure needed to make sure that they do the job that they need. We get a little bit of the business perspective. You come at this from a different perspective and talk a little bit about your work and about sort of surfacing. I'm particularly interested in surfacing different types of discrimination, including areas where we might not ordinarily be focused.
So the Equal Rights Center does this unique thing called civil rights testing. Testing is not a new thing. It's been around since 1950s and sanctioned by the Supreme Court. Most people know about kind of secret or mystery shopping, where you might send somebody into a restaurant and they're there to evaluate the quality of the service or the food. Testing is kind of similar in that respect, except we've got trained testers that we will send into an establishment, usually in a matched pair. So if we're trying to uncover whether race discrimination is happening, for example, we'll send in a white tester and a black tester. They'll be very well trained and scripted. They'll have very similar qualifications, and we'll see how their interaction goes. So for example, we recently completed an investigation in the criminal record space, which we have to pay homage to the EEOC and OFCCP and HUD for the work that they did really surfacing this issue of barriers for people with criminal records when they're coming back into society and their ability to get housing or gain employment. So we created an investigative project where we sent white testers with a criminal record and black testers with a criminal record out to try and secure rental housing. And what we did a bit differently in this investigation was we used women, because there's been a lot of talk about African American men and their ability to re-enter. Not a lot of talk about African American women. So we wanted to get a sense of what was happening to that group when they were going out trying to seek housing. And we found that in 47% of those interactions with housing providers, the white woman with a criminal record was actually favored. Now, not all of those interactions were legally actionable, but some of the more surprising results were when the black woman would go in with a criminal record and be just turned away, and the white woman with the criminal record, the housing provider would say, well, we can't let you apply for this particular property, but let me help you find other places where you can find a place to live. So that's the sort of thing that we were seeing in that particular study. And what's really interesting about the ERC's work is we can do these kind of audits and studies in this space and generate larger amounts of data, but that data also allows us to target more specifically companies that we see are having issues, and to do follow-up testing with them, to then reach out to those companies, let them know, look, you've got this problem, we're seeing it on your front line, because to someone's point, companies can have high-level policies, but if your frontline staff isn't implementing or following those policies, one, it'll get you into trouble, but two, you're turning away potential customers, right? So we'll go to them, we'll try and figure out if we can get them to kind of fix their issues, as Laura does in terms of advising them. And then if they don't, the ERC, if need be, will sue them as an organizational plaintiff. One of the great things about the EEOC, as David talked about, is their ability to bring EEOC litigation as a plaintiff. And so the ERC really focuses on, can we bring an organizational lawsuit if we can't get the company to fix its practices? And the reason why that's important is because if I'm a black woman and I am a black woman, I have a criminal record, and I'm going out and I'm applying for housing, to Paula's point, I don't know that I'm being discriminated against. I don't know who ultimately gets that apartment. Same with if you're applying for a job, I don't know who ultimately, gets that job. So I don't have that information. And if I have a criminal record, what's the likelihood that I have the resources, even if I figure out there's a problem, to do anything about it? So the EERC really tries to stand in their place and see if there is a particular problem, if we can bring a suit, as a plaintiff. But as a part of that, oftentimes we are reaching out to companies and saying, look, because people don't believe they have a problem until they see it. I mean, we live in the generation of it didn't happen unless it's on videotape, sort of thing. So making sure that companies get educated about this is what's really happening on the front lines of your company, and we're giving you an opportunity to fix it.
And are there tools or strategies that you use that you consider more cutting edge? You spoke about the testing work. That's really important work. There have been opportunities off and on in the administration. Various administrations have thought about that, but have encountered difficulties. Are there tools that you think are really sort of cutting edge that we ought to be thinking about?
So obviously more transactions are moving online. So a lot of our testing now is actually starting to move online. We're starting to have conversations really with some academic institutions about within the tech space, because I believe that the tech community really can be a leader in this space. And the one thing that's missing, and Laura kind of pointed to this, is we really do need more robust partnerships between the tech community and the civil rights organizations, because we're having conversations with people about how do you build scrapers, for example, so that you can deploy programs on the web and you can better identify when discrimination is happening in online communities, because testing, it's not just going to a housing provider on the ground now. You want to be able to look at ads on Craigslist, but there's millions and millions of ads on Craigslist, right? So we have to be able to target our resources more efficiently. We're also using mapping software so that we can better target neighborhoods where we see things happening. We're also looking for kind of public data sets, and the Obama administration was really leading the way in terms of taking government data and making it public and transparent and putting it online. And obviously we're seeing reversals in that space. But I do believe that another potential partnership is with academic institutions who are very well resourced and have the ability to generate a lot of public data. And so we're looking at those sorts of public online data sets. But we're just scratching the surface of what needs to be happening in the tech space and testing. When you start to look at big data and how that's influencing decisions, you look at artificial intelligence, which I'm a former employment litigator, I know nothing about, but I look at it with fascination when they say that artificial intelligence is designed to learn from us, which means it's going to pick up all of the biases that we have. And there are folks in the tech community that are doing some phenomenal work in the AI space. And what we need to do is start connecting those people with the folks in the civil rights community so we can develop a lot of those kind of high-tech tools.
Hello, my name is Amelia Hayden. I am a fellow with Respectability, and I'm a self-disability advocate. And I noticed a parallel amongst all the topics that you discussed on, particularly with EEOC, intersectionality, people of color. Now, my question for you is, with the ADA still being in its infancy compared to other statutes and other federal laws and mandated and compliance, as you have mentioned, how do we, as self-advocates, help our clients and our community keep up with the current times, since you mentioned that a lot of the employment field and sectors are going to this online, which is not accommodating under federal law with such as people who are deaf, blind, have disabilities, and holding them accountable when, like as you brought up, with the asking questions that are adverse to the population, such as, for example, when you have a administrative secretary position, you don't have to drive. But when it requires you, in the wording, you required state-issued driver's license versus a state-issued ID. When they are making the requirements that are setting up preconceived biases for this population that are a violation under the ADA, but yet when we call in to agencies such as Equal Opportunity Employment to hold them accountable, it's, well, do you have any proof? Or, well, maybe they should find a job at a sheltered workshop. So my question for you is, we are more than able-bodied to do the job. How do we hold agencies accountable and teach our communities how to advocate for themselves, in a sense, because not everybody can afford an attorney, and as I'm seeing, not everyone knows their rights as required under ADA.
So one of the issues that we're spending a lot of time on is accessibility for individuals with disabilities. The ADA is not young. It's been around since 1991. It's more than 25 years old. You think by now we'd have a lot more equal access than what we do. We do a lot of testing and site surveys in that space and are still finding lots of problems in housing accessibility, in employment accessibility and accommodations, and public accommodations. And we're seeing also, as you said, things are moving online, so this issue of website accessibility, the ability of you'd be able to go onto a website and be able to shop like everyone else. I mean, technology is a blessing and a curse. It could actually create more access if we actually push it to do that. And so taking testing and figuring out how to do it in this online universe is a priority for us. It's also important as we move to kind of this gig economy, because we used to have much larger institutions that we could try and hold accountable. Now a lot of those decisions are being decentralized. So how do we deal with those sorts of issues when we've got a very decentralized decision-making process now? And then to your point of making sure that people are educated, another piece we're looking at in really the tech space is how it is that we bring those communities together around those issues. So we're getting the education out there, but the communities are coalescing and educating each other, and also educating the ERC about where we ought to be deploying our resources in the accessibility space.